Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Chicagoland SharePoint user group session for April. My name is Dina Evers, and I want to welcome you all today. Just so everybody is aware, for those new members, you will be on mute for the session today unless we open it up for questions and answers and bring your own problems. If you have questions throughout the event, feel free to submit them through the chat function, and we'll be happy to take care of those during the session. The session is being recorded and will be loaded, and you will receive a link for that tomorrow. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mark, our host.
Hey everybody, this is Mark Vogt, one of the co-hosts we're calling ourselves these days of the Chicagoland SharePoint Users Group. This is April 17th edition that everybody's been waiting for. We have a lot to get through. I'm going to talk even faster than normal. Our co-hosts today are myself from Avanade now, Michael Blumenthal now with Aon, Ralph Rivas still with Magenic, Craig Jahnke is still with Concurrency. We've got a couple of presenters, even imported ones today from the UK. Tom Morgan from Modality Systems, and we've also got our own homegrown Piyush Shah with Emtec doing stuff on Chatbots later on today. The people who really make CL Splug happen on a monthly basis, Dina and Edie are in the background. Thanks again for all your hard work. Our agenda for the next 30 minutes, all the regular news, whether in sports, about SharePoint Office 365, SharePoint Framework, and even the Power Platform. We're going to get through in a couple of minutes to make way for the demos and the presentations, followed by stuff from an SPFx demo from Ralph that we've been waiting for a while, a new demo from about building apps for Teams from our host Tom in the UK, our guest presenter Tom in the UK, and last but not least, Piyush Shah is going to be giving us yet another flavor of chatbots embedded inside SharePoint. As time permits, bring your own problems, and then we'll talk about the next session. Dina wants a few seconds to talk about some questions that she wants to poll at you guys. Dina, over to you.
Thank you. I do, actually. I want to ask a couple of polls of the questions of the team. And I'm going to launch this one now so you can see the screen. All right, just to give you a little background, we've been looking at potentially starting up, we've actually had some conversation about quite a few user groups. And one of the topics that we thought that we would potentially do is looking at starting a national user group, more of a community on LinkedIn, similar to the SharePoint user group that would still meet maybe monthly, have a couple of or 2 to 3 presenters per session, but really talk about education of the topics that are referred to when you hear digital transformation or digital enablement or digital optimization. There's so many different topics that covers. And it would really be around educating, both the business and the IT side on what these technologies can do and how they can provide you with value, right? Because you're hearing a lot of noise out there in the industry about all these different things. Process automation, cloud. I mean, cloud's so huge, right? Mobile and mobility, either, mobilizing internal apps or external apps. IoT, AI, all of these things that are thrown out there, data analytics. So, having an opportunity to kind of have these sessions to talk about real life examples, use cases, potential project challenges, best practices. So I wanted to kind of throw that out there to see if anybody on this group would potentially be interested, and just to also get an understanding of the topic. So the first question, I'm going to go ahead and if you can just answer that now, and I'm going to go into the next question and we'll talk about a few of those topics. All right, so 3, 2, 1. All right, I'm going to close this one. The next poll, very, very quickly, take a couple seconds here, but here's a few of the topics that we've come up with just initially in terms of, things that we've heard that there's additional questions on, we do a lot of blogs on our side and understanding, a little bit more about cognitive computing and AI and how that can be used within SharePoint and other situations, right? We're going to be talking about, cognitive computing and chatbots and things on SharePoint this time around, right? Understanding, cloud and what makes sense, mobile strategies. So if you could kindly just plug in the topics that could potentially be of interest to you, we're really trying to figure out which topics to kind of start out with on these sessions. So we appreciate it. All right, Mark, thank you for giving me 2 seconds, and I'm going to go ahead and close out the poll.
You guys can still see my screen right now?
I can. Thank you.
Okay, continuing right along with SharePoint news and events. This is a handful of things. It's April, it's spring. There's a lot of cool things going on. On the news front, updated SharePoint product technology roadmap is available. The link is available there. Sad but true, guys, certifications are now available for SharePoint 2019. So those of you that just squeezed underneath the wire and took all of the old tests, well, guys, you got to go and start getting ready for the new tests in 2019. They just came out. Follow the link there. You'll find out more about it. Something I'm excited about, there's some improved web parts around page designing that are promised for SharePoint in 2019, and they're starting to come out. What are they related to? Code snippets, Markdown, My Recent Documents, My Recent Sites, countdown timers, and even YouTube embedded videos. The one I like the most is probably the Markdown and the My Recent Sites and the countdown timers. That's a really handy thing because it's pushing towards making SharePoint that collaborative, that interactive, regular, every day you go there, it's your workspace kind of an environment. Next on the items here, the modern UI is being nudged, i.e. forced into all SharePoint Online tenants starting in April 2019. Can you still get out and go back to the classic? Yes, but you got to work at it these days. You are now, the default behavior is this modern UI, so don't be surprised if you start seeing, if you're the admin in your group, your organization, and you start seeing people say, hey, what happened to classic? It's all got pushed into the modern UI. You need to go and find out more about it. Click on the link there. Skype for Business continues to move to Microsoft Teams. There's a lot of stuff going on there to make that all happen. One last little did you know, I knew this back in December that Microsoft had shifted Edge over into actually being based on Chromium. It's now been 6 months in that environment. But if you haven't actually taken a chance, taking a moment to go and look at Edge and wonder why it's starting to run the way it is and look the way it is, it's because it's Chromium underneath. You might want to continue giving Edge a chance. Don't have to kill yourself, but at least try. Events on the horizon. We've got the SharePoint Fest, April 29th to May 3rd in Washington, D.C. In May coming up, we've got SharePoint Cloud Saturday, a huge favorite here in Chicago on May 4th, runs pretty much all day, 8:30 to 4. And it's extremely well. We got more and more speakers than ever before. Check out the link on there to find out more. You don't have to show up the whole day. It's still free, the price. SharePoint North America is in late May, May 21st until May 23rd in Las Vegas. In fact, it's the largest SharePoint conference in the industry. If you want to go to one, that's the one you want to actually be checking out. Upcoming events from Craig. This is for the PowerApps and Flow. The users group is on May 2nd, coming up at 5:30 p.m. And again, SharePoint Saturday is on May 4th, 8:30 to 3:30 at DeVry University in Addison. That's like a halfway out into the western suburbs, as convenient as you can possibly ask for. Office 365 news and events. Mike Blumenthal couldn't make it today, so I'm going to go over his slides. We've got news, we've got upcoming events. It's actually really cool. The teams announced at the Enterprise Connect recently, there's customizable backgrounds that are coming. Team rooms with room content cameras built into them. The whiteboard feature is now public preview available. You go into Teams, go into Admin, you enable the whiteboards, and now that's a screen that you can share inside Microsoft Teams, and it's a very sophisticated board, very feature-filled, not sophisticated. I've been waiting for that for the better part of a year. I'm super excited by it. There's live options, subtitles available. What the big push recently in Teams has been is the idea that the information that's stored in those chats now needs to be treated like the private, confidential information that it is all about. It's about storing and saving and protecting that confidential information, that intellectual property of the organization. So there's private channels, info barriers coming, and there is data loss prevention for chats and conversation is now generally available. There's a calendar app, UX is going in full screen soon, and there's other live events becoming generally available. A couple of videos for us to watch right now. We get to see what that actually is looking like inside Microsoft Teams. I don't know if I have to turn the volume up for you to see this.
Yeah, I don't think there's volume to that, Mark.
No volume to this one? All right, we're going to go to the next one and see.
Yeah, I think it's just the video. Yeah, Michael just wanted to show everybody some of the newer features that are going to be available.
Yeah. Here we've got the share, and here's the web.
Cool.
And there's even more tools that I saw. Oh, they're there, yeah. it's kind of like paint, but there are times, guys, when you really need this inside Microsoft Teams. And if we're all being pushed off of Skype and Skype had it, and we're being pushed into MS Teams, and Teams is secretly SharePoint under the hood, this is a very welcome addition that a lot of people have been waiting for. Cool enough. This is a huge one for people that have teams that are overseas, where oftentimes the language barriers, even accents, I've got a Canadian accent, people don't always understand me. The idea of being able to do closed captioning along the way offers a huge improvement in retention and understanding of those conversations. We're really looking forward to this as well. I forget what this one was about. It's the built-in calendar that's going to be a part of it, the embedded calendar that's inside Teams. Michael always wants us to know that there's new icons have started to arrive. We've been waiting for 19 years for that. Glad to see it. Now upcoming events, we've got PowerApps and Flow. We already saw that. Oh, that was on April 9th and 10th. The Power Platform World Tour was very well attended. I got to present there, a couple of other colleagues. We had a great time. You guys, if you have a chance to attend one of those later on in the fall, the Power Platform World Tour, you absolutely got to show up at it. Toastmasters is starting up again. There's a link to the Midwest Toastmasters that Mike's really big on, and Ed Gallagher is in early May. Follow the link if you need to find out more about it. Let's see, SPNA North America, we talked about that on May 21st. Largest event in the industry happening in Las Vegas. You got to try to make that. Digital Work Experience coming up in mid-June. And we're handing over to Ralph. Ralph, I'm making you the presenter in 3, 2, 1. The floor is yours.
And clean handover, I hope. Everyone can see my slides just before I proceed.
Yep, we see your desktop.
All righty. Okay, let's explode in really quick. We're going to try to be very fast. I know we talked about a few items. You know what's not on that list was the May the 4th is SharePoint Saturday. Was not on that list for some reason. You want to cover that later?
It was prior.
With you.
We talked about it a couple of times.
Okay.
Yep.
Make sure you didn't miss that one. All right. So what's new in SPDev? All right. So it's Tax Week edition over here. I'm Ralph Rivas, principal consultant with Magenic Technologies.
Tax Week.
Yep, Tax Week. If you didn't do your taxes, then it means that you didn't have to pay. Pretty sure, right? Okay. All right. So what was big in the last few months since I've been here? We've been waiting for me to come back in a long time. SPFx 1.8 now. We're on that. I'm wondering what's going to happen when we get close to 2. Are they going to do 2, or are they going to start bringing down the numbers? God knows, because usually when you have a 2.0, it becomes bigger. But what's here? SPFx for SharePoint Online and Teams. Essentially, you create a web part, you get it to run on Teams and in SharePoint. This was, I think this was demonstrated over here like before, but it was not yet released, but this is the actual release. It's actually happening. The concept of the single part app pages. We've been old SharePoint could do it because you were doing all kinds of other magic, but now the fact is you can have a web part that essentially takes over the entire page. That's a big deal for folks who really care about the branding. Isolated web parts. The concept of essentially again making the part of the single part app pages. The fact that you can move these things apart. We probably cover that in another one that's more detailed. Provider hosted solutions, even though there was ways to do that before, really they tried to make those old provider hosted systems work on SharePoint Online. It was a little difficult to make it work. They got it working. There was a lot of updates on premises for what's called ALM, which is called the application lifecycle management, aka DevOps is what they really like a lot of that is. This wasn't really touted so much, but this was actually pretty major because a lot of folks were left in the hole when they moved things over, and they basically came back and solved them in the background. There's the open source SharePoint Yeoman generator that's out there. That's in full swing. That, by the way, has a whole bunch of updates. There's no way I can go over all those updates right now. But in case you guys are wondering what the generator now is not able to do, go and check that piece out first before going further. Coming soon. We have 1.9. Very likely they're timing this to come out with the North American conference. Yeah, we're in that stage right now. There's going to be something called shared libraries. Imagine now you have code that's being shared between the web parts. Pretty much you had to deploy each one together. You had your CDNs that were one of the ways around it, but to actually have shared libraries, big deal. More on-premises bits coming out. They basically essentially used to say, hey, please hold on, don't get mad yet. We know we're not all there yet. They want SharePoint on-premises has not been getting exactly the love, but they're assuring us that yes, it's going to get some love. And speaking of love, it's the continuous integration and continuous deployment. In other words, our DevOps Nirvana, something that we'll actually cover in a short bit over here to see how that goes. All right, let's take a look over here. Okay, yeah, so there was a demo we were waiting for a long time. In fact, this was ready back in Christmas time or before that.
Yes,
and,
we're not bitter.
So here I am today. I opened it up and I'm like, well, duh. How many changes came through? 1.8. This broke that. That broke this. The certificate broke here. It's like, oh, for heaven's sake. So I'm like, damn you, cloud. You all messed me up. Well, what do I do in the meantime? Well, how about this? I give you a peek at my actual live in-person Nerdvana activities, so you can actually see things that are actually going on. So here's what I'm doing. The CI/CD thing is that I'm not kidding about that. And where's my mouse? There it is. There we go. So you guys might recall that something called Team Services or Visual Studio Online is now called Azure DevOps. Well, that's their new name, ADO for short. Hey, ADO, that sounded like something really old, but we're not going to get there. But in essence, now you can automate your deployments for your SharePoint pieces online or on-prem. And here was the thing. When I told you that the on-prem wasn't getting the love, it was not. It was having a hard time. There was all kinds of things people had to do to make it work. In fact, when I hear people say, hey, we got it working, we went and found out that no, they really never did. There was somebody was doing something by hand, you know, in the back behind the curtains. But actually now it actually works. Just to give you guys a quick demo of what that looks like. The concept is you're putting in Node, and notice that the specific version of Node, very critical. You're doing your npm install. There's the ways to do that. You just hit add, and you can add whatever you want. So I say I want an npm task. I could say go ahead and find an npm task. So let's get that out of here real quick. And then of course we have gulp, the gulp pieces that you have to run. And I have over here, we're doing just a gulp build so I can do testing. There's code coverage. The Rentcore tools are probably the best for this, but for freebies, you can use what's called Corbatura. There are some blogs on how this works, but we have that in here, and we're bundling. You see this little thing I have over here, this worn off? Here's the thing, if you're on-prem, or not just on-prem, actually, if you're doing Azure DevOps, there's something they didn't tell you that you had to find in a blog, which is all your little warnings and stuff. Azure DevOps hates it. It's going to get mad. So we had to actually put in code, just like this that you see right over here. And here's a live example of this actual code. By the way, these are all on blogs. We can give that to you at some point later, but it's easy to find. As you can see, we added our own gulp task for warning off. And this actually gives you an idea of what you can do potentially with your own gulp tasks going forward. All right, so of course, then we package a solution. Of course, we have our warning. And then at the end of the day, and in fact, one of the things that we actually did, and you'll see over here, I'm getting NuGet. What am I doing at? Hey, isn't that for a regular program? Yes, because we have a regular program. We've pretty much put the PNP deployment stuff into its own solution. Right, and so we put that together with our application. We basically pack it up in a nice, pretty place. And in this particular case, we're actually using Octopus to do the code. So when the code is done, we go into the Octopus side of things, and we look at the source. Here we go. Inline code. Come on, let's show. So for example, this is a PowerShell of our deployment tool that we created. You could just run the PNP stuff directly, of course, but we put it all in a nice little place so that we can say, hey, put it depending on the domain you want, the username, the credentials, all that stuff is all locked down. So we can actually package our deployments to work exactly the way we want, where we want them to work. For example, in QA, we do something slightly different compared to everything else. In this one, of course, even it says in progress, but actually we have it, but it's a bit proprietary. Sorry to not show that, but that's an idea of what I'm working on right now. This is essentially telling you that you can you really do the CI/CD with SharePoint on-prem as well as online. So that was our secret tour. And let's get back over here to our secret tour. Secret tour is over. Really quick. So we'll give you one of these as a little consolation prize for not having a graph demo, which would have taken the rest of this meeting anyway.
Sure.
little treat. Look at 2019 feature sheet I picked off the internet. Somebody had this. It's really, really cool because it really tells you what's not here, what's been removed, and what's there. You want to go to your business users and say, hey, look, here it is. You know, is this easy enough for you to understand? Great.
Bye, info.
Otherwise, that's all. Thanks for listening.
Ralph, thanks, fantastic. You set the stage and made us hungry again to see great demos and to even see a life cycle SharePoint
it takes
embedded.
a while to run, right? So I can't exactly show you that running, but at least I showed you where the pieces are, and that's something that you can reach out. We can talk afterwards and tell you how to make it work. Go ahead and take over.
All right, thanks. Back to me for a second, just long enough to show a few slides. We got through Ralph's, we got through his little demo. Now we're going into building apps for Teams with our new guest speaker, Tom Morgan, a Microsoft MVP from the UK. Tom, are you ready?
Yep, totally ready.
Handing over to you in 3, 2, 1. The stage is yours.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Mark. Thanks, Ralph. I'm going to assume you can see my screen. Somebody will shout at me if you can't.
It looks,
all right,
it's
let's go. Perfect. All right, 20 minutes. Let's go. So technology. Technology is exciting because it's always changing. It's always evolving. That's why we're in this game, right? Because it keeps changing and it's interesting. And like sharks, we've got to keep moving. Otherwise we die. We need to keep asking ourselves what's next. Because what's next is really important, and we need to figure it out before other people do. All right, so why am I talking to you about apps? Why build apps at all? Like, let's break it down. If you're not a developer today, why should you even start? What's the point? Like, why do you want to get involved in this stuff? Okay, let's start with this quote. If you corner the market in data, you probably have more wealth advantages than if you corner the market in gold or in oil. Data is the real place where the money's at. So have a think about who said that. Who do you think might have said that? Like, you might think maybe Bill Gates said this, or Mark Zuckerberg, or someone like that. Nope. This was said by Justin Welby. He's the Archbishop of Canterbury. So he is not technical. This is a non-technical person. So data is becoming really, really important. So important that even all these non-technical people are kind of noticing this now and picking up on it. Everything we do is reducing down to data. Insurance, driving, like driving is the most obvious example of an entire problem domain being reduced to data. But medicine, legal, all these kind of places like apps, everything's reducing down to data, but apps are how your users communicate with that data and how they interact with it, how they consume it. So apps are becoming really important gateways to data. Good apps are becoming really important because users know good apps from bad apps now, right? They've been spoiled by the whole consumer market. And if you come in with your enterprise apps and your line of business apps and they're rubbish, your users are going to push back on you and say, hang on, these are not the same apps that I've been using at home. So that's why apps are important. That's why apps are going to become more important as we go forward as well, because it's the data that's becoming really, really important. Sure. All right, and to break down that title again, so we understand about building apps, but why Microsoft Teams? Why build apps? Why choose to build apps on Microsoft Teams? Well, kind of because it's where the users are. Now, I understand my audience. I'm not hitting on SharePoint at all. We all know, you know, and I know that like Teams is where it is at because it's built on SharePoint, and SharePoint is kind of powering all the data that comes through and all that kind of stuff. But the fact is, like, Teams is growing really fast at the moment in Microsoft history. Those numbers speak for themselves. But we're seeing more and more users moving over from Skype for Business, but we're seeing net new users come in as well, coming into Teams because it's enabled into, you know, so many SKUs, because it's available to so many people. We're seeing people come into it at kind of a crazy, crazy rate. So you've got some options, like this is where your users are at. You want to make your users more productive. You want to make them happier by bringing them the data, their data, to them in apps on the platform where they're at. So don't make them go somewhere else. Teams is where they're at already. Making apps in Teams makes an awful lot of sense. Also, Microsoft are making it easy for you to bring apps into Teams. There's lots of different extension points, which we're going to go through, and there's lots and lots of tools. All right, so at this point, kind of, I'm guessing some of you are probably thinking, right, this is great. Like, I get where you're going, Tom, but there's kind of a small problem here. I'm not a developer. I don't know what to do. I can't do any of this. I haven't got the skills. What am I supposed to do? Well, here's the secret, right? So development, especially this type of development, is kind of not as hard as it used to be. If you think back to the Skype for Business days, things like UCMA, that back-end kind of building applications that used to work with Skype for Business, that was relatively complicated. You did need to go through kind of some process of understanding how the whole thing kind of hung together. Now it's kind of easier, and it's kind of a lot more democratized. And there's a lot more interplay between different applications across the Microsoft stack as well. So I'm going to show you some things that you can do right now. I'm going to show you some ways you can get started and give you some kind of tools you can go away with. And I'm going to concentrate in kind of two key areas. There's a couple of different areas, places you could go, but I've only got 20 minutes. These are the two most important things you could look at. So let's start with viability. So what I mean by viability basically is, can you build what you want to build? Is it possible given the tools and the feature set you have today? So you need to understand the things that you can do in Teams and the types of applications you can build in order to make sure you take the right approach. Now, this is a landscape that is changing really quick all the time. So I was on a call just yesterday, a community call. There's a link to it later. Community call yesterday, they announced 2 new types of extension that aren't even in this list that are coming soon. So it is definitely a moving story and a kind of a moving target. I'm going to quickly go through these just to make level set and make sure everyone is kind of on the same page and they understand what these things are. All right, so I'm going to assume you understand Teams. You've seen Teams at least once or twice. Tabs that you kind of understand. Tabs are a nice, easy place to get started, right? Because fundamentally, they're kind of just web pages. There's a JavaScript SDK you can download that means that your web page will then have access to what user launched that kind of tab and what channel they're in and stuff like that. That's a nice, easy place to get started. Bots are a huge kind of subsection by themselves. I'm kind of going to skip right over them because they're going to be expertly covered in a little bit anyway. So I don't want too much kind of cross-contamination about what I'm talking about and what's going to be coming. So messaging extensions. Now I'm going to show you a messaging extension in a minute because I think they're kind of underutilized and we don't use them enough. And so I want to show you one so you understand how it looks. And then connectors. Connectors are really useful for bringing information into Teams that you might have happening in other systems, so legacy applications. I'm going to show you something you can do right now, today, to add information from legacy systems. And then finally, just so you know, you can bring stuff into the activity feed. So if you've got stuff that's happening elsewhere that you want to notify users about and it makes sense to, you can actually drop them straight into the activity feed. Now, this was mentioned earlier, so which is kind of great. Ralph mentioned it. This actually cuts both ways with SharePoint web parts. So you can actually take a SharePoint web part and surface it as a tab in Teams. Okay, so you're not having to rewrite everything that you've done already. You can take those existing web parts, you can put them into Teams. It actually works both ways as well. You can take your tab and you can expose it as a SharePoint web part. The Yeoman generator that Ralph mentioned earlier, if you look hard enough, in there is a Teams manifest file that will actually bring that stuff into Teams for you. So that's kind of interesting. So it's good because there's a lot. This is Microsoft kind of actually working together, the different teams, the different departments working together on a kind of common platform and not fighting each other, which is great to see. So yeah, it's kind of a nice place where you can write something once and have it work in both places. All right, so I promised you I'd show you messaging extension and connectors, and I also promised you something you could do today. So this is a thing you can do after this call. So go and find a channel that you like. Click the ellipsis, the 3 dots on the channel, choose connectors. You'll get a screen that looks a lot like this. Now you can look down the different connectors that already exist, and that's great. But what I want you to do is find the one that says incoming webhook and click add. When you do that, you're going to get a unique URL and a nice name that you can give it that I've called my new webhook, because why not? But you get that URL. Now, what that means is you can send messages to that URL, and when you do, they will show up as messages in that channel. And that's all you have to do. You just need to post HTTP post to that URL, and in the body, the message you want to send, and it's going to show up magically as a message in that channel. And that is super useful just by itself. Super simple, but very, very useful for exposing legacy systems, third-party systems. So let's take this example. So you've got some PowerShell. So all this code is on that link at the bottom left, but really, really simple. If you look at the top right of the PowerShell, that first line of the URL is just the URL from the previous slide. You've got the card that's being built up, and it just says kind of hello from PowerShell. And then all I'm doing is invoking that as posting it, the web request, and that's all you have to do. And it, boom, it shows up in the team. So that is something that you can do today. Take it away, add it into your existing PowerShell flows for, like, you know, when things go wrong, when things go right, things that are running on a schedule or reaction to things, and just start bringing that information into Teams, because that's where people are that, you know, will be acting on this stuff and, you know, needing to take action on it. All right.
So
the other thing, sorry, go on.
So then Teams becomes the aggregator of all of that information, even from the legacy systems, because you've given that webhook, you've created that webhook that lets the legacy systems literally push information into Teams.
Right. Microsoft talk about it as a hub for teamwork, but really it's like, I call it like an operating system for work. So all that data is coming in, and Teams is a good place because that's where people are having their conversations as well. So the data comes in, people talk about it, people act on it. Everyone goes home happy because they're not switching context, switching windows all the time. Another good example of that is messaging extensions, as they're now called. So these are the things I don't think get used enough. So let's say you have a products database because you're a products company and everyone talks in terms of product codes. You know, oh no, the stock level of like 4457 is really low. And that's great because that's their language and it's their world. But if you're new into that company, that can be quite intimidating and it takes a while to upskill. And that's happened because people don't like context switching to go and like resolve the number. You know, it's a pain to go back to the products database, put the code in and kind of find out. This is where messaging extensions can help. So when you make a new message in Teams, if you look down the bottom where you attach the files and do your GIFs and your memes, you can actually add your own icons in there. And when you do, you get control over the UI that appears. And so what we can do is have a search for our legacy product database. So on the left, that's what it looks like when it pops up. You can put your code in. That process of going off to the legacy database, that's just all API calls. It's not that hard to do. If you do any kind of bot writing, it's really, really similar to how the bots work. You can bring that data back. And when you click on it, it'll put a nice card into the conversation. So every time you have those product codes, now you can fill it out with the information about the product, a nice image, a link to how it looks, you know, to where it goes in the CMS, the amount in stock, whatever it is that makes sense for your organization, right? So lots and lots of options there for, again, bringing that data into Teams, bringing it where the users are and enabling your users to be more productive. Okay, so like I said, this is a landscape that does keep changing and evolving. The best place to stay up to date is the Teams developer platform landing page, which I've linked to there. It looks like that when you load it. The three big links on the top, they're really good for just getting that overview of what's available. And then there's loads of samples and stuff as well. I'm going to link to better places for samples in a little bit. So, viability. Let's talk about the other thing about tooling and libraries. And when I say tooling and libraries, what I really mean is kind of stealing and really reusing other people's stuff, because that's kind of what developers do all the time, even though they don't like to say it. Scott Hanselman said it really well. He calls it abstracting on the shoulders of giants. Okay. Basically, there's loads and loads of samples out there. It's not cheating to take an existing sample and make it work for your situation. So if you're starting out, lots of these will really, really help. Look on GitHub, because Microsoft are pushing loads and loads of samples on GitHub. I've got some links at the end to a samples gallery that will take you just to the Microsoft Teams samples. I wasn't going to talk about bots, but I am just going to call out the bot builder community. It's a relatively new thing, really good set of samples. And then also the bottom, brand new, the virtual assistant solution builder. If you're building really big applications that are like enterprise level and they need to be really smart and think of everything, that's a good place to go and read up on some kind of best practice, some PMP stuff, and there's a good overall sample as well there. There's some other tools as well that can help you. So one of the things you'll find when you do build applications is that if you want to get them into Teams, you need a manifest. And a manifest file is just a way of getting them into Teams. It's just a file that describes how it looks. And it used to be that you have to wrap those yourself, build up that JSON yourself manually, and it was a real pain. there's an application in Teams called App Studio that everybody should go and download if you even think you might do some development in Teams. So it's free. It's got a manifest editor in it. That's a WYSIWYG way of generating those horrible JSON files that we used to have to do manually. And what's even more clever about it, it understands all the validation rules and the schema of that JSON, so it won't let you do anything bad. It will generate correct JSON for you. It will also make it super easy to sideload your applications, so you can do all that kind of testing on your local machine as well. Also in that App Studio is a card editor and a control library, so you can build up those kind of rich text cards. You can actually send them to yourself as well. They'll show up in the conversation in App Studio, and even that conversation window in App Studio is smart because there's a bot in there that you can ask questions about development. So you can literally ping your question and it will just go through the documentation and come back with some suggested documentation links. It's pretty smart. So go and have a look at App Studio. You know, if you've any kind of idea, think you might do some development, just want to have a play and see what's available.
Cool.
The other tool I'm going to call out is ngrok. So without getting kind of massively technical, the way a lot of the team stuff works is that it's it's hosted code that you run that has to be publicly available. So definitely bots, but also those compose extensions, those messaging extensions and everything like that. You need to have them publicly accessible. And that's so that teams can see them and like things like the bot framework can see them as well. That's a bit of a pain if you're trying to develop stuff locally on your machine because teams can't see that. So you can't do any kind of like run it in Teams, but run it locally. ngrok gets around that. It's a HTTP tunnel basically. So you run it, you can see on the screen. Like you've got a local host on port 4040, but you've got a forwarding URL that is publicly accessible and HTTPS. So you can give that HTTPS value to Teams and say, hey, I've got an app. It's not published, it's just a development app, but it lives over here in this special ngrok URL, and Teams will go, oh, okay, and it will show your app, and every time you go to use it, it will then hit the HTTP local endpoint, so it will hit your breakpoints, it will hit your code, makes it very, very much easier than it was before to do this kind of debug run of when you're building up applications. So definitely go and have a look at that, have that in your kind of tool chest of things to look at.
So Tom, that passes even through the firewall to the local host.
It does a really good job. Because it's going from your machine out, it does seem to work pretty well. It's free to start, by the way. The limitation with the free thing is that every time you run it, you get a different URL. So you've got to go and update everything. So if you can, it's worth paying a little bit of money because then you get a hard-coded URL that never changes. Sure. All right, so to recap, because I know I've talked at you and I know I've talked fast. So data is really important. Data is the future. And apps are how users interact with that data. So apps are here to stay, and it's worth kind of understanding how important they are. Teams is a good platform for app development. Microsoft are all in at the moment on building apps on Teams. They really are. They've got some stats that are showing that the more instances there are of apps in a Teams instance, the more usage it gets. So suddenly they're like, oh, this is interesting, and they're going all in on app and pushing app development. We've seen how Teams and SharePoint, those solutions play really nicely together, which is good. There's lots of different ways you can add Teams into, so you can add functionality and apps into Teams, and you don't need to be hardcore developers to get started. So promise tools and libraries and samples. This page I want you to go away with. So calls to action. I want you to go and do that thing with the connector after this call, but then also go through some of these links. So I showed you the landing page. I didn't show you the dev blog. I didn't show you the code gallery. So it's exactly what you think it is. It's a gallery of downloadable samples. There's a monthly community call for Teams developers. That was the thing that I was on yesterday. And then I've got a bunch of stuff on the web as well that you can look at. Aware that was a very quick run through. So if you do have any other questions after this, feel absolutely free to ping me on Twitter and I'll do my best. My name's Tom Morgan. I work at Modality Systems. Thank you very much. Mark, back to you.
Tom, fantastic. It was wonderful having you. I have a feeling you're going to become a regular guest speaker here if you can handle the time zone change for us.
I hope so. This is a good time. This is good.
Oh, good. Glad it worked out for you. I'm going back to my screen really quick.
Hey, Mark, we had a question that came in, really quick question. Can you pull video from stream to the relay page? So Tom, would you be able to potentially answer that while we're flipping over to Piyush?
can you pull video from stream to the relay page? Not sure. I don't think so, but leave it with me. I will find out, but I don't think you can.
Thanks.
And we'll let's consider it a homework item to find out what it would take if it is possible. We'll come back with an answer for in the May session, which is what we try to do as well. All right, fantastic. Our next speaker, our last speaker of the day, is Piyush Shah from Emtec here in Chicago. That's going to be presenting on chatbots inside SharePoint. Piyush, I'm handing off to you in 3, 2, 1. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mark.
Sure. We can see.
Okay. Yep. So I'm going to talk a little bit about chatbots in Teams. Thank you, Tom, for really insightful way of doing that. A lot of that groundwork has gone into the demo that I'm going to show in today. So just to step back, what I'm going to basically talk about is, AI, is sort of walk of life today. We all know that it's anything that is exhibited by machines, which can mimic human minds, right? It was largely academic, and now it has become a talk of life. We've got technologies to cover the different facets of AI in terms of understanding the nature or need of the data that is coming in, whether it is voice, images, text, languages, and interpreting that, putting a reasoning behind that, trying to analyze that data that is coming in from different sources, and then reaching out to different sources, interpreting the patterns, and then delivering that experience back to the end user. I think it all gels up well to make this field really, futuristic in coming days. Adding AI, of course, boosts the power of the apps significantly. Things that were traditionally not possible are now easily possible. You can look at the reach of typical devices. I'm sort of diving specifically into conversational AI, which what chatbots is all about, on how the reach of devices like Google Home and Alexa has been Cortana all over the marketplace today, right? Chatbots, or in specifically conversational AI, is a subfield of artificial intelligence, which focuses more on the seamless conversation, which is more natural to the user or human being, and the computer would interpret that and react to the user in the form that the person would understand, right? It's growing at a massive pace. It's going to cover, the growth rate on chatbots is literally close to 40% compounded annually, and is expected to reach a $6 billion USD market by 2023, right? With that, I think what we really want to look in this forum is how SharePoint is, as a platform, is supporting all of this, and thanks, Tom, really, for bringing that Teams development perspective here. There are several things that Microsoft has brought from a cognitive services point of view to SharePoint land, in terms of how different use cases that can be handled with in SharePoint, and cognitive services coming together. When you're uploading images, there could be cognitive image APIs to tag them. When you're uploading documents, there could be index based on the cognitive APIs. And recently there was a launch of service where you could actually go to audio and video intercepted files and go to the transcripts of those and figure out what exactly the content that you're looking for. So all of that can be built in to search the content in the SharePoint world. There can be transformations for specifically Adobe files and things like that you could use on top of it to generate previews and thumbnails by use of cognitive services, which will make it the overall user experience seamless, right? In specific to chatbots, I think chatbots, and I'm sort of going to dive into the very high level architecture here, but SharePoint can form the backbone of the chatbot architecture, where the source content could be coming from SharePoint, as well as I'm going to show you in the demo, the delivery of the content to the end user is also going to happen through SharePoint world, which is Teams, and specifically the bot section that Tom was referring to. So SharePoint definitely helps it on both sides. And now how this works is, bots, it's never perfect at the start of the game. You will have training models involved to sort of train your bots in terms of what the requests are coming from user, how you will learn from those type of questions, those type of inputs that are coming in, work on top of that, and modify or train your model to be perfect to serve the users better. Right? There are different tools, both from Microsoft platforms and outside, built on top of those, which will help us train the chatbots to cater better. So quickly, a land of AI Microsoft services categorized more into infrastructures, the cognitive services, or in general the bot frameworks and machine learning services that it has on AI services, and then the whole tooling stack to support, right, from Visual Studio to Azure ML to different types of toolkits that are available, including deep learning frameworks of TensorFlow and all of that. We have pretty much all of that in the Azure land. I mean, that will be a whole separate topic, but I'm going to pick up just two key points from here. One is the bot framework and the cognitive services that could be put together to depict on how a typical chatbot architecture would look like. And there is manifestation of this on top of it, which is a Q&A maker, which specifically addresses a Q&A chatbot that I'm going to show in the demo today. But as you can see, there are different channels through which you can reach out users. Teams could be one of this, and I'm just going to show that. And then you have Skype and Slack, but the bot connector will take the input and reach out to your bot code, which will first translate it using natural language processing service from Microsoft, Lewis, and then you can basically source the data based on your intent from any of the data sources, be it Oracle, SharePoint, ADP, or payroll. So in terms of a simple employee bot, you would want to show an employee what is the leave balance that would come from an SCM system, what are the policies that are uploaded on the SharePoint, and so forth. Right. So quickly, what I'm going to go to the demo here and real quick is show you how you go to SharePoint teams, and then a bot which is essentially developed using the bot framework can be used on multiple channels, including web and Teams as one of it, can be deployed with manifest files correctly configured to point to the bot that is deployed in Azure. So I'm going to flip my deck here over to a browser. So this is a typical Teams that I have set up here. I get an option as an admin. I'll get an option to upload a custom app. Right now, I've not published my app to the Microsoft Store, so I'm uploading my custom zip here. The zip is going to typically have an icon, logo, and a manifest. We can look at the manifest shortly, but it basically has all the information that it can refer to on a deployed bot from on the Azure that it can refer to and interact with that code. The code essentially will then talk to either a Q&A maker service, which is another Microsoft add-on on top of the whole Lewis architecture that we just saw, and will allow user to interact here, right? So there's a flag here on the a message here. I'm going to call and ask my mbot about what is my referral policy, right? And this question can come in any different form and shape, or different ways of addressing the same code. And you can see there are, and it pulled up right from right source my information about my referral policy in the organization, or if what was my dress code, and it would go and pick up my policy of the company around professional appearances and so forth. And the same bot exactly is now deployed as a web in a web app on a web application that I have. And essentially, I don't have to do anything there, but really deliver it to a different channel, which is a web application there.
Hey, Piyush, I have a question for you. This is searching SharePoint for the documentation, or is it actually searching other places too? Can you have it set up in Teams where it'll search your SharePoint as well as other systems?
Yes, yes, we can definitely do. As I said, Team is one delivery channel here, but the sources of that can be varied. So it can go to SharePoint, it can go to any custom sources, including your ERP systems, HCM systems, or anything that the bot, the Azure portal can, Azure backend code can talk to. So as long as there is an interface to pull that information, it should be able to do that.
Okay, thanks.
All right, I think that's all I had. Over to you, Mark.
Fantastic. Thanks, Piyush. One thing to mention is that everybody on the call today, you're seeing a big push on Teams, you're seeing a big push on AI, you're seeing a big push on chats, because that's where the wave really seems to be heading, that Teams is acting as the new UI to SharePoint. So it's not just coexisting, it's actually starting to eclipse the regular classic interface of SharePoint as far as what people are willing and wanting and productive at interacting with, where SharePoint's under the hood. And what everyone is finding out, you're seeing presenters here from lots of different consulting firms in this users group, from Avanade, from Emtec, from Modality Systems, from Magenic, from Concurrency, all learning the same thing, that to derive the maximum possible utility out of your SharePoint investment, we need to be looking at the UI that is Microsoft Teams in the SharePoint. Then we need to be augmenting it with the applications that we're seeing that can be embedded, which include not just regular functionality, but even that AI, that artificial intelligence, the bots that allow us to interact in a friendly human manner, that goes from being a very topic-specific Microsoft Team channel to possibly eventually taking over your whole intranet with a little assistant like Avanade has called IDA that sits in the back of our SharePoint website. Our SharePoint-based intranet is running a little chatbot called IDA that lives everywhere. So you expect to see IDA in Teams, in websites, in the internet, everything related to SharePoint. That's actually serving as your concierge, I guess would be a really good word for it. Tell me if you can see the slide deck where I'm at right now.
Yep, you're fine.
All right, we're going into BYOP for the last 5 minutes. Is there, let's see, we're looking at some questions popping up already. Is there an MCSD SharePoint certification from Songmei? Yes, there's been one for quite some time, Songmei. There might be some new ones out that we'll have to take a look at updating everybody. Like we just found out the new SharePoint certifications are coming out. There's still only 2 exams that you have to take basically for SharePoint certification, but for 2019. What did you have in mind, Songmei? What did you have in mind specifically that you're looking for certification for? And if anyone else has any other questions, any other problems that you guys have been facing, gosh, since February, I guess, since we didn't have a March session.
So Mark, I'm going to go ahead. I unmuted Songmei. Songmei, if you have any additional questions or follow-up.
Yeah, feel free to open up the mics.
Yep, I'm going to do that now.
While we're at it, thanks to Piyush, thanks to Tom, thanks to Ralph, all making a return engagement and coming with more specific times. We'll probably only have 2 demos coming up in May, 2 coming up in June to give more time for a little bit more detail because everyone's going to be hungry.
So everybody, I'm unmuting you. So if you do not wish to speak, feel free to go ahead and mute yourself. All right, Tom, Patrick, Songmei, Ryan, Peggy, Patrick, Mike, Eric, Dan, Craig, Amy, a bunch of different people on. If there's anybody that has any questions, looks like we had another question come in. Mark, if you can...
a little bit of feedback.
I have a question about filters, using data part filters and then exporting that data to Excel. I find that when I do that, it doesn't do it, and it seems to me that it's because I'm using parameters and they're in the view, and those parameters are empty, so it doesn't bring any data back. Do you have ideas or thoughts on how to make that work?
Anybody? What are you getting back? Are you getting back absolutely nothing on the filtered list?
Oh, no, I get the columns back, but blank data space.
So this is the web part you're using, or is this Excel itself?
I am using so I'm clicking on export to Excel to get the data.
Yeah.
If I do it directly in the filter, it works great. But if I choose filter data parts to do the filtering, then it doesn't export the pieces that show up on that, in the web part that's being filtered.
Oh, so it's the data parts where it's happening.
So I have two data filters, and then they feed a list data part. Yep.
Or list data part. So it's from there, then it doesn't go. It's not. You're not able to get it when it goes through there.
That's correct.
Sounds like permissions.
Really? I'm the site collection admin. I don't think it's permissions. I really did some testing on this, and I was able to confirm that if I use export to Excel, and as long as the filter is part of that data web part, like if you go in Designer and look at the data web part itself and it has the actual values, then it works great. But if you remove those and use parameters, for whatever reason, the data binding part of the view doesn't get
so it's just the parameters that breaks it. So it's not working. It's working in some cases and not working as soon as you add a filter.
That's correct. It's not, and to be more specific, it's not a filter because the filters themselves work as long as it's part of the web page, the web part. But if it becomes an external filter using a date filter web part, okay.
Okay, so just the date would it work with a regular filter then? Is what you're saying? Like a string filter?
If strings, dates, doesn't matter. As long as the filter is part of the list itself, part of the view, then it works great. But as soon as I use an external web part to feed that list, then it doesn't work anymore.
An external web part, yeah, from the third. And this is SharePoint Online?
No, 2013.
Okay. All right, and here I am thinking. All right, stand by. This sounds
one more time. What was the part you said, Mike, about the external? Did you say an external list, an external column, external web?
No, so I'm probably using the wrong words, so I apologize for that. But when you make a web a view, you can have filter web parts, and you can add those to the view, and then you connect those filter web parts to the list itself, the list web part.
Yep,
and that drives what shows up in that list web part on the screen. But if you try to use export to Excel, it doesn't export any data, because if you look at the actual view in Designer, it shows there's parameters there, and those parameters basically don't get values when you do the export, because it's not pulling it from the text filter or the date filter in this case. It doesn't find them.
It rings a bell, not for the same reason though, but because since we're looking at 2013, it's been a while in my case. I'd have to probably look that one up though. But you should allow us to, if you put in some information, we can help you follow up and help you search on this one, because this one sounds very, very familiar.
Yeah, and we all got to go look it up, like you said, because it's from 2013. So we're going to take a friendly challenge, Mike. We're going to come back with an answer for you. If not by May, then by sooner. Mike Barcelo, we ought to be able to find you on LinkedIn, at least even try to find that information for you. Guys, let's watch my very last slide. We're talking about the May session now. We only got 1 minute left. We're aiming for May 15th. You guys tell us what else you want to see. We are going to make a concerted effort to try to get back to the single page apps and the app development inside SharePoint. But we did feel the push to want to talk this session about chatbots, about AI, about Microsoft Teams, all of the updates happening in SharePoint Framework and in Microsoft Teams lately. We ended up with, I think we had 16 attendees at the very end today. Fantastic. Thank you, Craig, Dan, Eric, KZ, Mike, Patrick, Peggy, Ryan, Songmei, and Tom. Thanks to the guest speakers, Tom over in the UK, to Ralph, to Piyush. Fantastic session again today. It'll be recorded. It'll be made available to you. We'll email it out to you shortly, and we'll see you guys on May 15th. Let us know if you have any other topics that you want us to cover, okay? That's it.